Do not feed her. She is not a customer. Grant Maddox said it loud enough for the whole diner to hear, and for one cold second, every fork stopped halfway to every mouth. Rain hammered the windows of Hartwell Table on the edge of Cedar Falls, Ohio, turning the parking lot lights into trembling yellow halos. The place smelled of burnt coffee, warm grease, and old vinyl booths wiped clean too many times. In the corner sat a woman in a faded gray coat, her hair damp from the storm, her hands folded around an empty paper cup like it still held heat. Her name, for that night, was Ellie Warren. At least, that was the name she had given the waitress when she asked for something small, anything warm, and promised she would pay when she could. The waitress had looked at her shoes first, then her coat, then the empty cup. "This is not a shelter," she muttered. A man in a blue dress shirt laughed under his breath. Another woman pulled her purse closer. Ellie lowered her eyes, and that was when Caleb Mercer walked in with $6.80 in his pocket, a plastic pharmacy bag under one arm, and the tired walk of a father who had already spent the day being strong. He did not look like a hero. His jacket was worn at the cuffs. His boots had salt stains from last winter that never fully came out. His face carried the quiet exhaustion of double shifts, overdue bills, and bedtime stories read with an empty stomach. At home, his 8-year-old daughter, Nora, was waiting in their small apartment above a shuttered hardware store, probably drawing houses with yellow windows the way she always did when she wanted the world to feel safe. Caleb had promised her supper. Not much. Tomato soup, 2 slices of bread, maybe a little butter if the cook was feeling generous. It was supposed to be their last meal before payday, stretched carefully, divided fairly, made cheerful by a father who knew how to smile around hunger. He ordered it at the counter and paid with folded bills and coins warmed by his palm. Then he heard Grant's voice. "Escort her out." Ellie stood slowly, cheeks flushed with shame, not anger. "I am sorry," she said. "I just needed to sit for a minute." "Then, sit outside," Grant replied. 3 quick chuckles followed. One from the man in the blue shirt, one from the waitress, one from a young assistant manager who wanted badly to be noticed. Caleb turned with the tray in his hands. The soup trembled inside the white bowl. The bread steamed against a paper napkin. He looked at Ellie, then at the door, where rain swept sideways across the sidewalk. He took one breath, the kind a man takes when he knows doing the right thing will cost him something. Then he walked to her table and set the tray down. "She is a customer tonight," Caleb said quietly. Grant looked him over and smiled without warmth. "And who exactly are you?" Caleb slid the spoon beside the bowl. "Just a man sharing dinner." "With what money?" someone whispered. Caleb heard it. Ellie heard it. The whole room heard it. But Caleb only pulled the paper napkin from beneath the bread, folded one slice carefully, and tucked it into his jacket pocket for Nora. "Eat while it is hot," he told Ellie. She stared at him as if he had handed her something far greater than soup. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here." Now, back to Caleb Mercer, because no one in that diner knew the woman they had just humiliated was Evelyn Hartwell, the chief executive officer of the company that owned every table, every sign, and every secret in that room. Caleb did not know her real name, and that mattered more than anyone in the room understood. If he had known she was Evelyn Hartwell, if he had known her signature could open banks, fire executives, and move entire markets before breakfast, the gift might have looked smaller. But he knew nothing except that a woman was wet, hungry, and being made to feel invisible. So he stood there with his hands empty and his daughter's bread folded inside his jacket pocket, while Grant Maddox stared at him like poverty was something contagious. "You think this makes you noble?" Grant asked. Caleb did not answer right away. The rain kept tapping the glass. The fluorescent lights hummed above the counter. Somewhere in the kitchen, a metal pan clicked against a stove, sharp and lonely. "No," Caleb said at last. "I think it makes her warm for 10 minutes. A few people looked down, not because Caleb had shamed them loudly, but because he had refused to. That was always his way. He carried pain like a man carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs, one step at a time, without asking who was watching. Caleb Mercer had not planned on becoming the kind of father who counted quarters in the laundry room and pretended breakfast for dinner was a treat. 10 years earlier, he had worked installation for a heating and cooling company, made decent money, and came home every evening to a little house with porch lights and laughter in the walls. Then his wife, Hannah, got sick. Then the bills came. Then the house went. Then Hannah was gone, and Caleb was left with Nora, a box of photographs, and a promise whispered beside a hospital bed. Keep her safe, keep her kind, and never let the world teach her that love depends on money. Since then, every day had become a careful negotiation with survival. Rent first. Electricity second. Medicine when Nora's asthma acted up. Food whenever there was enough left to make it look normal. He worked overnight unloading trucks at a food distribution warehouse on Route 62, then picked up repair jobs on weekends, fixing porch lights, loose cabinet doors, old dryers, and anything else people were willing to pay $30 for. Still, the apartment stayed cold near the windows, and the refrigerator made a hollow sound when Nora opened it, as if even the shelves were embarrassed. What Caleb feared most was not hunger. He could endure hunger. He had done it quietly enough that Nora almost never noticed. What he feared was the manila envelope on his kitchen table, the one from Family Services, the one that said his custody arrangement would be reviewed if he could not show stable income, proper housing conditions, and consistent meals. Those words had followed him all day. Stable, proper, consistent. Words built for people with savings accounts and second cars, not for a father who patched his daughter's winter coat with thread from an old work shirt. Earlier that evening, Nora had stood by the window in her pajamas, holding a crayon drawing of the two of them at a long table covered in food. "Daddy," she had asked, "when payday comes, can we get the soup with the little noodles?" Caleb had smiled as if that question did not break something small inside him. "We can do better than that, sweetheart," he said. "Maybe bread too." She had grinned like he had promised her a castle. That was why he had stopped at the diner after his shift. That was why the meal mattered. It was not just soup. It was proof that he could still bring something home. And yet, standing under those buzzing lights, watching Ellie lift the spoon with trembling hands, Caleb felt no regret. Only a quiet ache, and beneath it, a strange peace. Because a man with almost nothing still has a choice. He can guard the little he has until it turns hard inside him. Or he can give one piece away and remember he is still human. Across the table, Ellie took one small bite, and her eyes filled with something she tried to hide. Caleb looked away to protect her dignity. Grant saw only a poor man wasting food on a poorer woman. But Ellie saw the folded napkin in Caleb's pocket, the careful way he saved half a slice of bread for someone he loved, and for the first time that day, the powerful woman beneath the old gray coat began to feel ashamed. Ellie lowered the spoon into the soup again, but her mind was no longer in the diner. It was back in the glass tower in Columbus that morning, 42 floors above, streets where people hurried with coffee cups and clean shoes, where no one looked hungry unless hunger had been turned into a chart. At 8:15, Evelyn Hartwell had sat at the head of a polished walnut conference table, while Grant Maddox clicked through a presentation filled with smiling families, warm meals, and words like community, compassion, and access. The numbers were perfect. Too perfect. Food waste was down. Labor costs were down. Public approval was up. Grant had stood beside the screen in a Navy suit, his voice smooth as expensive leather. "The regional system is stronger than ever," he said. "Lean, efficient, profitable." Evelyn had watched the slide change to a photograph of a little boy holding a bowl of soup under the Hartwell Table logo, and something inside her had gone still. "What happened to the community meal program?" she asked. Grant did not blink. "Reallocated." "That was not my question." "It was underused," he said. "Expensive. Difficult to manage. People abused it." 3 answers, quick and polished. 2 board members nodded. One assistant kept typing as if morality could be recorded in bullet points. Evelyn leaned back and looked at the photograph again. The boy in the picture was not from one of their stores. She knew it because she had approved that campaign herself 7 years ago, back when her father was still alive and Hartwell Foods still believed a restaurant had a duty beyond profit. Her father used to say food was never just food. It was welcome. It was dignity. It was the first language of mercy. But after his death, the company had grown faster than her grief could keep up with, and men like Grant had learned to wrap cold decisions in warm words. Then came the envelope. It had arrived without a return address, delivered to Evelyn's private office by security. Inside were three things: a printed complaint from a former warehouse worker, photographs of sealed trays of edible food dumped behind a store, and a handwritten note that said, "They are using your name to turn hungry people away." At the bottom was one more line: "Ask about Cedar Falls." Evelyn had read it twice, then a third time. "Who sent this?" she asked her chief of staff. "We do not know yet." "Does Grant know?" "Not unless you tell him." So Evelyn did not tell him. Instead, she canceled her afternoon meetings, removed the diamond watch her mother had given her, left her phone and driver behind, and bought an old gray coat from a thrift store 3 blocks away. She took 87 cents in change, a bus pass, and the name Ellie Warren, a name plain enough to disappear inside. All day, she walked into places that carried her family's logo. At one location, a cashier told her the restroom was for paying customers only. At another, a manager asked her to leave before lunch traffic arrived. At a supermarket owned by her company, a security guard followed her down the canned goods aisle until she stepped back into the cold. No one shouted at first. That was the surprising part. Cruelty did not always begin with volume. Sometimes it came softly, through a smile that did not reach the eyes, through a policy recited without mercy, through a door held open only so someone could be pushed out of it. By the time she reached Cedar Falls, rain had soaked through her shoes, and her pride had worn thinner than the coat around her shoulders. She had wanted the truth. Now the truth was sitting across from her in the form of a tired man who had given away the meal meant for his child. Caleb Mercer did not know he had become evidence. He did not know that every quiet insult in that diner was being written into Evelyn's memory like testimony. He only stood near the table, steady and hungry, while Grant Maddox smiled at him as if goodness was a mistake that needed correcting. Grant stepped closer to Caleb's table, his polished shoes stopping just short of the puddle dripping from Ellie's coat. "You are making everyone uncomfortable," he said. Caleb looked around the diner, at the lowered eyes, the half-finished plates, the phones quietly angled toward him. "No," Caleb said. "Hunger makes people uncomfortable. I am just putting a bowl in front of it." The words were not loud, but they traveled. Ellie kept her hands around the spoon, afraid that if she moved too quickly, the whole fragile mercy of the moment would break. The soup was simple, tomato with a little black pepper and a few soft noodles settled at the bottom, but to her it tasted like something older than comfort. It tasted like being seen without having to prove she deserved it. Caleb stood beside the booth, not sitting, not hovering, just close enough to make sure Grant did not reach for the tray again. "You do this often?" Ellie asked quietly. Caleb glanced down at her. "Do what?" "Give away dinner." He gave a small tired smile. "Only when someone needs it more." "And do you?" she asked. "Need it?" Caleb looked toward the window where rain ran down the glass in silver lines. For a moment, the diner noise thinned into the hum of lights and the soft scrape of a chair leg across tile. He could have lied easily. Men like him learned to lie kindly. "I already ate. I have food at home. I am fine." But something in Ellie's eyes asked for truth without demanding it. "I have a little girl waiting," he said. "Her name is Nora." Ellie lowered the spoon. "Then you should take this back." "No, please. Eat." 3 small words. No speech. No performance. Just a line drawn with quiet dignity. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket and touched the folded bread wrapped in the paper napkin. He had tucked it away before Ellie could notice, but she had noticed everything tonight. The napkin had a purple crayon heart on one corner, uneven and bright, with the letter N written backward beside it. "She drew that?" Ellie asked. Caleb looked surprised, then softened. "This morning. She puts hearts on things she wants me to remember." "What did she want you to remember today?" He rubbed his thumb gently over the folded edge. "To come home." Ellie's throat tightened. All day, she had been turned away by people trained to measure worth at the register. Now a man with salt-stained boots and a custody notice probably waiting on his kitchen table was saving half a slice of bread like it was treasure. Caleb did not know that his small act was undoing years of Evelyn Hartwell's carefully protected distance. He did not know that the woman in the gray coat had sat through $100 million negotiations without trembling, yet now could barely swallow because a child's crayon heart had made her feel the weight of every cold policy signed under her name. Grant folded his arms. "This is sentimental nonsense," he said. "Sir, I am going to ask you one last time to leave." Caleb turned to him fully. "And I am going to ask you one last time to let her finish eating." The waitress froze near the coffee station. The assistant manager stopped smiling. Even the man in the blue shirt lowered his phone. Not because Caleb sounded threatening. He did not. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. But there are moments when calm becomes stronger than anger, when respect stands so still that disrespect has to reveal itself. Ellie took another spoonful because Caleb had protected not just her hunger, but her dignity. Then she looked at the napkin in his pocket again, at the little purple heart meant for a child waiting at home, and she understood that this meal was not the last thing Caleb had. It was the last thing he could afford to give, and somehow he had given it without making her feel poor. Grant's smile thinned, and for the first time that night, irritation cut through the polish. He looked at Caleb more carefully, not as a stranger anymore, but as a problem he had seen before in another room under harsher lights. "Mercer," Grant said slowly. "Caleb Mercer." The waitress glanced up. The assistant manager shifted his weight. Caleb did not move. "You work at the Route 62 distribution warehouse," Grant continued, loud enough to make sure the name spread from booth to booth. "Night shift. Loading dock. I remember now." Caleb's eyes stayed steady, but something tightened in his jaw. Ellie noticed it. So did Grant. "You are the one who filed those ridiculous complaints," Grant said. "The one who claimed edible food was being thrown away." Caleb answered quietly. It was not a claim. It was an accusation. It was food. 3 words, plain and heavy. The diner seemed to shrink around them. Outside, the storm pressed hard against the windows. Inside, the air carried the smell of soup, coffee, and something colder than rain. Grant took one step closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal while still letting everyone hear. "You know what I think? I think men like you love a cause because it distracts from failure. You cannot fix your own life, so you point at everyone else's." Caleb's hands relaxed at his sides. He did not defend his poverty. He did not list the shifts, the bills, the nights Nora slept warm because he stayed cold. A person with dignity does not always answer every insult. Sometimes he lets the insult stand there, naked and ashamed of itself. But Grant was not finished. "Tell me, Caleb," he said, tilting his head. "Is this how you feed your daughter? Giving away dinner to strangers so people can clap for you?" The words landed hard. Ellie looked up sharply. Caleb looked down at the bowl, at the spoon in Ellie's hand, at the folded bread in his pocket with Nora's purple heart pressed against his chest. For one brief moment, the pain crossed his face before he gathered it back into silence. "Leave my daughter out of this," Caleb said. "Why?" Grant replied. "She is part of the story, is she not? A struggling father, a sad little girl, a heroic bowl of soup. It is almost touching." A few people shifted in their seats, no longer amused. The waitress looked at the floor. The assistant manager swallowed. Even the man in the blue shirt lowered his phone as if the joke had soured in his hand. Ellie's fingers tightened around the spoon. She wanted to stand, to say her real name, to end it with one sentence. But something stopped her. Not fear. Witness. She needed to see how far cruelty would go when it believed power was watching from its own side. Caleb spoke first. "I do not need anyone to feel sorry for me." His voice was low, clear, and tired in a way that made the whole room listen. But she needed to eat. Grant gave a short laugh. "There it is. The noble poor man." Then, with a careless sweep of his hand, he knocked the edge of the tray aside. The bowl tipped. Tomato soup spilled across the table, down onto the tile, and over the toe of Caleb's worn boot. No one laughed this time. The sound was small, almost nothing, just ceramic scraping, liquid spreading, a spoon spinning once before it went still. But it felt like the loudest thing in the room. Caleb looked at the soup on the floor. He looked at Ellie, whose eyes were now wet with anger and grief. Then he bent down, picked up the spoon, and placed it gently back on the table. "You should not have done that," he said. Grant smirked. "What are you going to do?" Caleb reached for a stack of napkins from the dispenser and began wiping the floor himself. Slowly, carefully, not because Grant deserved it, not because the diner deserved it, because Nora had once asked him why people should clean up messes they did not make, and Caleb had told her, because the world gets better when someone chooses to. Ellie watched him kneel beside the ruined meal, protecting everyone's dignity except his own, and in that quiet act she saw the truth more clearly than any report could have shown her. Grant Maddox had not just spilled soup. He had exposed the soul of the company she had trusted him to lead. Caleb finished wiping the floor, while everyone watched the kind of silence that does not forgive easily. The soup was gone, the bowl was empty, and the little purple heart in his pocket had a damp corner from the rain and the steam and the shame of the room. Ellie stood slowly, still wearing the gray coat, still playing the part of a woman with nowhere to go, but something had changed in her eyes. They were no longer tired. They were awake. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded once. "Find somewhere dry tonight." Grant laughed under his breath. "That is touching. Truly. Now both of you can leave." Caleb looked at him, not with anger, but with the worn patience of a man who had learned that pride can make a bad night worse. "Come on," he said to Ellie. "I can walk you to the bus stop." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded slice of bread, checked that it was still clean, and held it for a second like a father holding his last promise. Then he placed 2 quarters on the table, the only tip he could leave, and walked out into the rain beside the woman he thought was poor. Behind them, someone posted the video before the door had even swung shut. But the video did not show Caleb offering the meal. It did not show Grant insulting his daughter. It did not show the soup being knocked aside. It started with Caleb standing over the spilled bowl, Grant's voice calm and professional, the caption already written to make the world cruel in a different way. Angry warehouse worker causes scene at Hartwell table. By morning, it had been shared across Cedar Falls, then Columbus, then beyond. People who had never been hungry decided what hunger should look like. People who had never carried a custody letter decided what kind of father Caleb must be. At 6:10 in the morning, Caleb's supervisor called from the Route 62 warehouse. His voice sounded tired, but not unkind. "Caleb, I have to suspend you pending review." Caleb sat at his kitchen table in the dim blue light before sunrise, still in the same clothes, his boots drying near the heater. "You saw the video? Human Resources saw it. There is more to it." A pause. "I believe you. But belief is not paperwork." Caleb closed his eyes. There it was again. The world reduced to forms, clips, policies, and signatures. Across the room, Nora slept on the couch under a faded quilt because the bedroom window let in too much cold. Her drawing from last night lay on the table beside the manila envelope from Family Services. A house. A long table. 3 bowls of soup. 1 purple heart over the door. At 8:32, the phone rang again. This time it was Ms. Donnelly from County Family Services. Her voice was careful, practiced, and heavy with procedures. "Mr. Mercer, we received information regarding an incident at your workplace affiliate. Given the ongoing review, we will need updated proof of income and household stability." Caleb looked at the empty refrigerator, the unpaid electric bill, the bread wrapped in Nora's napkin. "How long do I have?" he asked. "Not long," she said gently. Nora appeared in the hallway then, small and barefoot, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy." Caleb turned, forcing a smile that did not reach his face in time. She saw the envelope. Children always see what adults try to hide. "Are they going to take me away?" she asked. The question broke the room into pieces. Caleb stood and crossed to her, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say never. He wanted to build a wall around her with nothing but his voice. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and held on. Outside, rainwater slid from the fire escape in slow silver drops, and somewhere far above the city, Evelyn Hartwell was about to see the full video. Evelyn Hartwell watched the edited clip once, then again, then a third time with the sound off, because lies often reveal themselves better in silence. She was back on the 42nd floor before sunrise, still wearing the gray coat over her blouse, her hair damp at the ends, her shoes stained from the night rain. Her chief of staff, Marla Jennings, stood beside the conference table with a tablet in her hand and worry in her eyes. "The clip is spreading fast," Marla said. "Grant's office is already calling it a customer safety incident." Evelyn did not look up. "Give me the store cameras. All of them. Every angle. Front counter, dining room, kitchen entrance, parking lot, audio if they have it." Marla hesitated. "Grant will ask why." Evelyn turned then, and the room seemed to cool around her. "Let him." 3 hours later, the truth arrived in separate files, each one stamped with a time code, each one colder than the last. Evelyn sat alone as the first video began. There was Ellie Warren, hunched in the corner booth. There was the waitress refusing a cup of coffee. There was Grant stepping in with his clean suit and cleaner cruelty. Then Caleb entered, tired shoulders, pharmacy bag, coins counted at the register, his meal paid for with the careful math of a man who could not afford mistakes. Evelyn leaned closer when he set the tray in front of her. No flourish, no performance, just mercy placed on a table. The next angle showed what the public clip had hidden. Grant speaking about Caleb's daughter. The tray being knocked aside. The soup spilling across tile and boot leather. Caleb bending down, not to protest, not to shame anyone, but to clean the mess he did not make. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. She had seen corporate fraud before. She had seen men bend numbers, bury complaints, polish ugliness until it looked like strategy. But this was different. This was the moment a company lost its soul in a bowl of soup. Then came the parking lot camera. Caleb walked Ellie to the bus stop beneath a broken awning while rain fell in bright lines through the streetlight. He took off his work jacket and draped it around her shoulders even though he was already shivering. He waited until the bus came. He stepped back before she boarded, giving her space, giving her dignity, giving without asking for a name. When she was gone, he stood alone under the awning and pulled the folded napkin from his pocket. The bread inside was damp at the edge. He checked it anyway, carefully, hopefully, as if love could still be carried home even after humiliation. The little purple heart was visible for less than 2 seconds. Evelyn paused the video there. She stared at it until the room blurred. "Find him," she said. Marla's voice softened. "Caleb Mercer?" "Yes." "For legal?" Evelyn shook her head. "For justice." By noon, she had his personnel file, his complaint history, and the family services notice he had submitted when applying for emergency scheduling support. Grant had marked the request denied. Reason, low priority. Evelyn read those words twice. Low priority. A widowed father trying to keep his daughter fed had been called low priority by a company built on feeding families. Outside her office, executives gathered for damage control, but Evelyn did not move toward them yet. She opened the final clip once more and watched Caleb place 2 quarters on the table after losing the only meal he had bought. He had been insulted, recorded, suspended, and still he left a tip. That was not weakness. That was character so deeply rooted that even shame could not pull it out. And in that quiet office high above the city, Evelyn Hartwell finally understood the full measure of the man Grant Maddox had tried to make small. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the regional boardroom at Hartwell Foods was full of people who believed the meeting was about protecting the brand. Grant Maddox sat near the front with a legal folder open, his tie perfectly centered, his expression calm in the way guilty men sometimes practice in mirrors. Around him were directors, public relations officers, regional managers, and 2 attorneys who had already drafted a statement calling Caleb Mercer's behavior unfortunate, disruptive, and inconsistent with Hartwell values. Evelyn entered last. No tailored navy suit. No diamond watch. No polished armor. She walked in wearing the same faded gray coat from the diner, the cuffs still damp, the hem stained from the storm. Conversation faded at once. Grant stood halfway. "Evelyn, we were just reviewing the incident." "Sit down," she said. He paused. "We have a strategy." "No," she replied. "You have a cover story." The room went still. Evelyn placed a small remote on the table, then looked toward the screen at the far wall. The first image appeared, the public clip, the one everyone had seen, Caleb standing near the spilled soup, Grant looking controlled, the caption accusing a warehouse worker of causing a scene. Grant cleared his throat. "As you can see, he created a disturbance." Evelyn clicked again. A new video filled the screen. The room saw Ellie Warren sitting alone in the corner booth. They saw the waitress refuse her. They heard Grant's voice say, "Do not feed her. She is not a customer." A few faces changed. Not much at first. Just the slight lowering of a chin, the tightening of a mouth, the quiet discomfort of people recognizing truth before they were ready to name it. Evelyn clicked again. Caleb entered. He counted his coins. He paid for soup and bread. He turned at the sound of humiliation, walked across the room, and set down the only meal he had purchased. The audio was clear. "She is a customer tonight," Caleb said. No one in the boardroom moved. Grant leaned forward. "That angle does not show the full context." Evelyn looked at him. "Then let us keep watching." The next clip played. Grant mocked Caleb's job. Grant mentioned his daughter. Grant called his kindness sentimental nonsense. Then came the moment the tray tipped, the soup spilled, and Caleb, instead of shouting, bent down with napkins and cleaned the floor. The boardroom was so quiet that the air conditioning sounded like wind over an empty field. One attorney slowly closed his folder. A public relations officer looked at the statement in front of her, then turned it face down. Grant's confidence began to crack at the edges. He filed false complaints, Grant said. He made accusations against our food disposal process. Evelyn clicked once more. Photographs appeared. Sealed trays behind a store. Bags of edible bread marked for waste. Internal emails with Grant's approval attached. Then a scanned copy of Caleb's complaint, dated 6 weeks earlier, respectful, detailed, ignored. Evelyn's voice remained calm. Mr. Mercer told the truth before any of us were brave enough to hear it. Grant stood fully now. This company cannot be run by emotion. Evelyn turned from the screen to him, and the gray coat suddenly looked less like a disguise and more like evidence. This company sells food, she said. If hunger does not move us, we have no business being in this business. No one applauded. That would have been too easy. Instead, something heavier settled over the room, the kind of silence that arrives when power finally loses its costume. Evelyn placed a printed document on the table. Grant Maddox, effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Your authorization over regional operations is revoked, and the legal department will review every denied complaint under your supervision. Grant opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the man who had always known what to say had nothing left. Evelyn faced the room again. The advertising campaign is canceled. The budget will be redirected to a permanent community meal program at every Hartwell table location. Not for publicity, not for photographs, for people. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice softened. And Caleb Mercer will receive a public apology before sunset. On the screen behind her, the final paused frame showed Caleb's hand holding the folded napkin with Nora's purple heart. The richest room in the building stared at it in silence, and not one person dared call him poor again. The public apology reached Caleb's phone at 4:47, but he did not see it right away. He was sitting on the edge of Nora's bed, helping her tape a sheet of plastic over the drafty window, pretending it was a project instead of a problem. The apartment smelled faintly of toast, laundry soap, and the tomato soup he had never brought home. Nora had been quiet since morning, the kind of quiet children use when they are trying not to make a worried parent more worried. Then someone knocked. Not loud, not official, just 3 gentle taps against the old wooden door. Caleb stood slowly, expecting Ms. Donnelly, or a landlord notice, or one more piece of paper asking him to prove he was enough. But when he opened the door, Evelyn Hartwell stood in the hallway. No gray coat this time. No disguise, no photographers behind her. Just a woman holding a covered box of hot food in both hands, and shame in her eyes. Caleb stared at her. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. Ellie, he said. She shook her head softly. Evelyn. Evelyn Hartwell. Behind Caleb, Nora peeked around the kitchen doorway. Evelyn looked at the child and smiled with such tenderness that Caleb's guarded expression faltered. I owe you both the truth, she said. Caleb did not invite her in immediately. A man who has been embarrassed by the world learns to be careful when the world returns with gifts. Is this pity? He asked. Evelyn's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. No, this is justice coming late. She handed him a folder. Inside was a formal apology signed by Hartwell Foods, confirmation that his suspension had been lifted, back pay approved, his complaints reopened, and a new position offered. Community meals coordinator for the entire region, with benefits, steady hours, and enough salary to make family services stop treating poverty like a character flaw. Caleb read the first page, then the second, but his hands stopped moving when he reached the part that said his name would be attached to a permanent program feeding families in need. I did not ask for this, he said. I know, Evelyn replied. That is why it matters. Nora stepped forward then, holding half a cookie wrapped in a napkin. Are you the lady Daddy gave soup to? Evelyn knelt so they were eye to eye. Yes, sweetheart. I am. Nora studied her for a moment, then held out the cookie. We share things here. That broke Evelyn in a way no boardroom ever could. She accepted the cookie with both hands, as if it were something sacred. Caleb looked away, not to hide weakness, but to give her privacy inside her gratitude. 6 months later, Every Hartwell table in Ohio had one small table near the front window with a simple sign that read, "Reserved for anyone hungry." No purchase necessary. No explanation required. In the Cedar Falls location, beside that sign, there was a framed paper napkin with a purple crayon heart and a backward letter N. Caleb never liked speeches, so he did not give one. He simply arrived each morning, checked the kitchen inventory, greeted the staff by name, and made sure no child, no parent, no tired stranger in a wet coat was ever treated like hunger made them less human. Grant Maddox's name disappeared from the company directory, but Caleb Mercer's quiet dignity changed the way the company measured success. Not only in profit, not only in growth, but in warm bowls served, doors kept open, and people allowed to sit down before they had to prove they belonged. And Evelyn Hartwell, who once disguised herself to find the truth, found something greater than truth that night. She found a man who had almost nothing, yet gave like his heart still believed the world could be redeemed. If this story touched you, share in the comments what you would have done if you saw Caleb give away his last meal, and tell us whether you believe one quiet act of kindness can still change a whole room. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.